Good morning. I'm Bethany Zach with RelishWorks and backofhouse.io. I'm excited to host another panel discussion about a topic that is overwhelming the restaurant industry today, staffing. This was a problem that the industry was grappling with for a number of years before 2020, and now we're seeing this problem just continue to accelerate post-COVID. We've seen companies try incentives to apply, referral bonuses, increased pay, and new benefits to entice people to join the hospitality industry. But the jury is still out on what will work and what won't work. So we have two experts today who have been trying to tackle this problem, and they're here to share their perspective on how the restaurant industry can recruit and retain employees in today's competitive environment. I want to welcome Ross Bodenberg, account executive from Landed. Landed serves major metropolitan areas across the United States, and Kim Smith from Smika Strategy, who is the owner of Smika Strategy. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Yes, thanks for joining us. I'm going to dive in, and Kim, I'm going to start with you this morning. So with experience at companies like UberWorks and ShiftGig, you have a deep background in the gig economy hospitality space. While leading the worker experience at ShiftGig, you were responsible for hiring, onboarding and orientation, support and training, as well as managing the on-shift experience. So I want to ask you first, in that time, or in your experience here, what was the biggest lesson you learned about hiring staff at that time? And what do you think is different today?
Sure. Thanks so much. And thank you all for having me here. So, a lot of my time has been spent at these working with large technology companies within hospitality. But here's the number one thing that I've taken away, which is while there are a variety of tech solutions that can be amazing efficiency drivers, in no way, shape, or form do they replace the human element. Right. So the takeaway I have is that you can use these tactics of automation to save time, but what they shouldn't do is replace those crucial moments where you're engaging with your workers. So if you can use Zaps to copy and paste data where you're not interacting with folks and you can save time that way, wonderful. Having a personal human connection with your team, with people you're trying to hire for your team, cannot be replaced with automation. I don't think that's in any way, shape, or form different today. And I actually think as more and more technology floods the market, the need to have strong human relationships, treat people well on staff, walk the walk that you say in your ads, in your tech and everything is as important as it's ever been in this space.
I was on mute. Kim, I had a follow-up question for you. One thing that we're seeing a lot of, especially to appeal to the Gen Z, is like text application. So as you were talking about like the digital experience and the human touch, when do you apply the digital experience, and like when do you start to bring in that human touch in the recruitment process?
I think it's a great question. You do both throughout, but as an example, texts are great for confirmations of you have an interview scheduled in an hour. Is this still a good time? Right? Make sure that they're going to arrive for that interview, what you're going to do in person. So I think you can use text throughout the process. I think texts are great for short capture of information. Are you still good? Does this still work? Do you have questions? But as an example, what we found is we use automation for everything and automated text all throughout. But the difference between that versus an actual picking up the call before someone's first shift, their first day of work, and extending that warm personal greeting. Hi, I'm the general manager. I know tomorrow is your first day. I'm just reaching out. Want to say how excited we are to have you start. Make sure you know how to get into the building. Any quick questions? Anything I can do. So instead of using human time up front in the process or with things that can be easy touch points, I would push that time to those critical times it really matters. explaining your restaurant and finding out if somebody is a good fit, having that connection there. When somebody says yes, I never take yes for granted. I always confirm that they're really going to show up and extending that personal greeting at that point. I think another great time is if somebody starts and joins your team and they get started, is there a personal reach out, in person, phone call of how was your first day? How did it go? Anything we can do, any questions that came up, and making people feel that they are part of the team. So it's not that it's tech only at this point, or tech, in person, or, actual conversation at that point. It's more when to use tech for the easy stuff and when the really important things can be handled, with a personal conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think of it as like, we're speaking to the hospitality industry today. Like, it's just applying the same hospitality to your staff. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Kim, another question for you. So I'd love to hear what you think the number one challenge is for operators to overcome as they look to hire today.
Sure. I mean, I think it's obvious, and everyone on the call would agree, it's the extreme competition for talent, right? We have not seen this tight of a labor market in years. Despite our low unemployment, we know that during the last 15 months, as people have left the hospitality industry, other industries have hired folks away from hospitality. So it's not only is it competition within our markets, it's competition with other markets. And so, the challenge to me for restaurants and hospitality operators is really taking this hard look and saying, what are we offering to our employees? How am I standing out in the crowd of this large choice that workers now have today, right, of employment opportunities? So, and doing things to stand out. And, I would say within that space, it's not just spending more money advertising, right? That is not a long-term or sustainable solution. It is, how are you speaking to your workers? Where are you finding? Where are you connecting? And what are you really bringing to the table as to why somebody wants to work with your establishment? I think those things have always been important, but now as people have more choices than they've ever had, including the choice not to work or the choice to work in a different industry, looking inward and answering those questions of what am I offering and how am I standing out are the challenges that operators need to overcome. And of course, we'll get into some of those suggestions on, what you can offer and how you can stand out as well.
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. Ross, I'm going to come to you right now. So Landed has created this mobile app to really bridge the gap between hourly food and retail workers and local employers. Your platform really evaluates candidates on 50 plus data points, such as communication skills, body language, work longevity, and others to determine a great fit. And right now, you have some really big name clients. You're working with Chick-fil-A, you're working with Wendy's and Applebee's. I'm curious, what are your clients telling you right now about recruiting, hiring, and retention during this unprecedented point in in this time?
Yes, thank you, Bethany. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here as well. To put it simply, what our clients are telling us is that obviously, as Kim mentioned, and obviously it's most people in hospitality are seeing this right now, is that it is extremely difficult to hire and retain good employees currently. What we're seeing is a disconnect between the jobs available and the candidates seeking to fill those positions. This is happening in markets across the U.S., especially now that things are opening back up and people are trying to fill the house, but they do not have access to the similar labor supply they once had. And what we're seeing is that it's important for employers to respond that much faster to candidates when they show interest in a position. The greater delay in response time, the more likely good candidates have a chance to slip away. And then we're also finding that now more than ever, growth opportunity and cultural fit are on average a lot more important than pay in a lot of times, is some of the data that we're seeing. As well as the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring is also on the rise in terms of something that candidates and employees value with their employer. So those are some of the things that we're really starting to see from our clients, and what's really kind of a change that we're seeing currently.
That's great. Thank you. I'm curious, in your perspective, Ross, how different are the challenges that the chains are facing versus these independents face?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, some of the challenges are structured around each segment and what they have access to in terms of an asset, right? Chains obviously have a much larger support network. They can access in the form of software, capital, staff, the ability to move people around and have resources to outcompete others. Places like traditional job boards, add signing bonuses, whereas independents typically do not have access to these resources, especially on this magnitude. So that is a drawback on the independent side, is that they do not have that liquidity as much. But however, they do have qualities that appeal more to candidates, such as a greater opportunities for growth, career learning, and more direct access to ownership that they can learn more from throughout their career. This is something that allows independents to appeal more on a fundamental level to candidates this day and age, and something that chains really have a difficult time with. Many times chains will have a homogenous culture and less of an opportunity for upward mobility in an individual's career.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm just going to kind of capture, what I heard, and please fill in if I miss some things. So, Kim, you were talking a lot about just setting yourself apart, and I think that trying to figure out like how do you make your, not just your role, but like the industry stand out compared to all the other options that are out there. And then Ross, as what you were saying, is it's the culture, it's the growth opportunities, and really I think for the independents to focus in on what growth looks like within a smaller independent compared to a larger chain is one way an independent can really kind of compete in terms of in their recruitment strategy. Anything I missed there, you guys, that you want to make sure that we repeat for our audience? Okay. So Ross, I'm going to stay with you for just a minute. I'm curious, you were talking about independence, you've worked with the chains. What are some of the most innovative and successful strategies that you've seen your clients utilize recently to tackle some of the things that you were talking about?
Yeah. So basically what we're seeing for our more successful clients is that first, they're very proactive in their embracement of technology and are very agile for that reason. As I mentioned, the speed to respond to a candidate is very important, and they trust that some of the work is to be done for them by automation. At the same time, they understand that technology is only as effective as its user, and to be effective, the user must be engaged, right? This doesn't mean that they have certain technical skills by any means, but rather they're willing to use the technology as the way it was intended, and they understand that technology is a tool and must be used properly. And even if the simplest tools require human interaction, and very seldom it's a solution you can just, as I like to put it, just set and forget, right? Because as Kim was mentioning earlier, the personal touch is very important to candidates as well as employers this day and age, and really highlights that culture. But a nice kind of integration with technology is a more perfect solution, allowing the technology to do the work where it can and providing that human touch where appropriate.
That's great. Thanks, Ross. Kim, I'm going to pose the same question to you. You've been in this space for a long time as well. What are some of the innovative and successful strategies that you've seen that have tackled this problem for others?
Sure. So starting at the top, and to your point about these are different tactics if you are a regional chain say, hiring 50 plus people or an independent operator who has to hire 5, right? So, but starting at the top is how do you get the word out? And I think if you're hiring a lot of folks, some of the innovation we've seen are movements towards programmatic ad spend, which are working with a programmatic platform that gets your job postings out all across the internet. It saved you time from posting on 20 different sites. It also gets your message out beyond just job boards. So there's been a huge growth in programmatic and seeing a lot of efficiency gains. Now, that makes sense if you're a large operator. On the flip side, and actually this one still does work for large operators, the other thing I've seen for getting the word out is engaging with workers where they are. So take social media. Many of the major cities have Facebook groups that are for service industry folks, as an example. So I am based in New Orleans, right? Hospitality is in our blood. It is the backbone of our economy. There are very active Facebook groups where people share tips all the time and people can post jobs. And many companies do. Now, there's a very different in the authenticity of some versus that others, but finding workers and meeting workers where they are is a common refrain I work with my clients with. And I think that starts with just getting the word out. So being present, what people are talking about, how they're talking about opportunities, and then sharing your opportunities there. So those are kind of two ends of the spectrum, just at the top of how do you get the word out. Programmatic is one way if you're doing a lot of hiring, and just simple job posts and social media groups is another thing. The other thing, I'm totally with Ross on using things like text to engage with folks and move people down the funnel, because that speed is critical. If you apply to a job and it takes 3 days for somebody to get back to you, that person is very likely moved on, because what you'll find people are actively in the hunt, they're going to apply to multiple things. If somebody gets back to you right away, someone else takes 3 days, guess what? You're already down the path on this. If you really have a high intent to work, we see that. So anything, and again, there's lots of tech platforms, but you can make a simple form on Google with Google Forms that is entirely free to capture intent to work and send an automated response right away, right? So those types of tactics that move people through the funnel quicker. The last thing I would say is, and I think has been a very much accelerated during the pandemic, when I talk about meeting workers where they are, some people want to drop into the restaurant, hand you a resume in person, and talk to you. For other people, getting to that downtown location where you're located is difficult, because you have to take public transportation or find parking, pay to parking, for what might be a quick interview. So the movement of people using things like Zoom to talk to their grandparents has greatly accelerated, even in the hospitality, people's willing to do things like video calls. So one tactic that we did a lot when I worked with the team at Uber Works was we would have phone interviews scheduled, right? And to be clear, we would overschedule. So I might, if my phone screens took 20 minutes on average to do, I would schedule 6 an hour, because I would assume that a lot of people wouldn't show up, because there's a lot of that happens. But what we would do is call. If you leave a message, not many people listen to message. A far better tactic for us is call. If we missed the scheduled phone interview, we would send an immediate text and say, hey, sorry we missed you. Either A, we're still here if you still want to talk, maybe you just got busy, or B, maybe you want to complete this online. So again, giving somebody the option. Maybe you can't talk live right now, but you want to submit some video where you record something, or you can do a video interview. So that idea of finding workers and giving them the choice of come in person at a job hiring event, talk to me on the phone, talk to me on video, which I think has given hiring managers a lot better connection with potential employees, or just do this entirely digitally and answer some questions and submit a quick video. We found that you can meet different people at different places where they are, and that choice helps get a better conversion rate overall and helps you move people through your hiring process a lot quicker.
This is great. I'm just going to summarize this again, just so that everybody has this like kind of condensed list. So I would say like the first thing that you guys both highlighted was the speed at which you respond, the speed at which you communicate to your candidates is going to be critical going forward. Because of the competitive nature of the industry right now, like taking a day, 3 days, you're going to lose out on these potential interested candidates. The second thing is, combining both technology and that human touch. Leveraging it, and we'll get to this in a minute too, just, in terms of communication prior to interviews, early interview process, and then even during the interview process. The third is, and this is probably something that is going to apply more to regional multi-units and the national chain community, but that programmatic ad spend to really get the word out that you're hiring. But for independents, I would say the fourth tactic here is engaging people where they are. So looking for those Facebook groups, looking on LinkedIn for local groups that are specific to the industry. And then the fifth thing is options for interviewing. So this can include in-person interviews, essentially digital, like video interviews, but making it easy for people to engage with the business and the way that it's easiest for them or the most comfortable for them from a time-consuming standpoint. But I think it's really about that employee experience at that stage and just making sure that you're meeting them where they need to be met. Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Yep. Thank you. I'm going to go back to you, Kim. So, getting down to kind of brass tacks, what do you think are the most important factors in getting the right people to apply and getting candidates to show up for their interview and then for their first shift too? So we've kind of talked about like getting everybody through that first process. Now it's, do you have the right person and how do you get them to come back?
Mm-hmm. So it's a big question, and I think there's a lot of different ways to answer it. And I'm going to separate kind of the stream into sort of two topics. One are what I call tactics, right? What are the kind of smart best practices of getting in front of folks and moving them through. The other is sort of the big picture. What are the barriers to work, to people successfully working in hospitality? And how can you, as an individual operator, as a chain, sort of address some of those key things? Because attracting great people, getting them to show up, means you've created an environment, a career path that is, or a job opportunity that is good in the moment or good long term. And so, to me, I think there's lots and lots of tactics that can get people to show up on day one, but the big picture are what do we as an industry have to offer people to keep them involved? And in my experience with both UberWorks, with ShiftGig, which was a large gig platform in the hospitality space, right? I worked with workers working in hundreds of locations, and there were three things that consistently came up that were barriers to keeping good employees, right? And these things are not wildly outrageous things that also cost companies lots of money. But the quality of the work environment, right? The quality of the work environment. Secondly, transportation and parking challenges. And the third is working parents with childcare issues and how they can be successful in the hospitality space. Okay, and I realize this is a very different conversation than send a text message to confirm an interview, and I think there's a place for that. But consistently, the things that I saw taking really good employees, the ones that you want, out of the workforce and good things, were much more of these big issues. And to be clear, I don't think that an individual restaurant is going to solve the issue of childcare limitations in America, right? That's not realistic at all. However, I do think there are some real things that companies can do to make their businesses more attractive to these segments. And there are things as simple as, literally as simple as, If you want to attract working parents, and to be clear, working mothers are the biggest segment of the worker population that has not returned after the pandemic, right? Of everyone across the board who has not come back, working mothers. Why? Because they have this very important thing that they're also responsible for. I actually posed this question to a bunch of working parents in hospitality. So these are not necessarily my words, but listening to them. Simple things. Post your schedule 2 weeks in advance. I have kids. I have to juggle childcare. I have to juggle after work activities, all of these things. When you post your schedule on a Friday for Monday, it gives me no time to do this. So a very simple and begged for by everyone, the more you can put your schedules out in advance, the better that is for me. And if I know that my employer understands these obligations, that helps me come back to work, right? It is things like understand when does daycare end, right? If I'm on the day shift and I end at 3, make sure I can get out by 3 because I've got to get my kid at 4 and I can't be late for that. And being conducive to those types of things. Create an environment where it's okay for people to swap schedules, and we don't punish people for that. We know that people have lives and things come up. So do you use a tool like Hot Schedules? Or again, there's loads of technologies out there, but can you create this environment where it's okay and you make it easy and you don't create a lot of overhead, but you make it easy for folks? I had someone say, listen, I'm a nursing mom. There's no place for me to do that. So how am I supposed to pump? So can you even, and imagine this ad standing out. Hey, we are a family-friendly place to work. We know you have lives. These are the 3 things we do. We publish schedules in advance. We work with your schedule. We help cover shifts when unexpected comes up. We have a private office where nursing moms can work. And even little things, restaurants, you do family meal. Many restaurants that do family meal, right? We do family meal and we make double so you can take home, the extra and have a fresh, have food for your kids, really great food for your kids because you're always running around trying to feed your kids, and that works for families, but it's also that doesn't have to be exclusively for families. Hey, family meal, bring a Tupperware. We give you a Tupperware, take it home to your partner, or frankly, just have it for yourself for a second thing. So there's some restaurants that are really taking the time to think through the needs of their workers and make the environment one that can help them work there long term, right? So again, and I obviously have strong feelings on the topic. I think there's loads of things we can do to use technology and things like this to get somebody to show up for their first shift and things like that. But at the end of the day, what is the environment and how are we helping people? It will go so much further than spending 3 times the amount on advertising today, offering sign-up bonuses, doing all of these things, which frankly cost a lot of money, and they don't have as long-term of impact as simply having good managers walk the walk every day with their team.
Those are great examples, I think, of things that are, what they demonstrate to me is empathy for your workers, and just thinking through, what do they need? How do I make it easy for them to get to work and show up for work every day? I love these ideas, and they feel really achievable and viable for independents. When you think about the family meal option, I love that. I think the posting schedule, that doesn't require a ton of new investment, or it's just really going a little bit further to make it easier for working parents. One thing I wanted, and Ross, I do want to ask you the same question too. But Kim, you said something, and I just was hoping maybe you could drill down a little bit into it. You said one of the first thing that you listed was quality of work, which I feel like is pretty broad, or maybe it's workplace, but could you maybe just define that a little bit further for our audience in terms when you heard this, what they actually meant?
Sure. There's a couple things. One is a zero tolerance attitude towards harassment, right? That has been something we've seen a moment in industries that many workers, female workers, minority workers have to face, from coworkers, from customers. So just having people's back, letting people know that that's not tolerated. And that comes from management treating people with dignity and respect and making sure everyone down to workers. Think of all the incidents we've heard where frontline workers have to be the voice of the nation enforcing or not enforcing mask mandates, right? That takes a stress on people. That is, so I think quality of work environment it starts with just basic dignity and respect that not everybody in the hospitality field gets on a daily basis. But I think it grows to some of the things that Ross mentioned, which is advancement opportunity, right? So if you see the hospitality industry as simply, I can go from dish to prep and no further, are we attracting those people? How do you set that path? How are we doing things like these programs like tuition reimbursement that we're seeing more of to help people either advance in hospitality, advance in their career in general? So I think of those, there's no tolerance for the harassment. There is opportunity for skill development and a growth. And then that is the being part of a team, right? Sometimes I think one of the absolute best things the hospitality industry has, and I've seen it in a million places, those great environments where everyone is working together, having fun, loving what they're doing, and creating that camaraderie with those teams. And sometimes it's in the busy, it's been a very stressful year. We lose sight of all those. So I think there are easy things, and there are investment things like paying for education, but all of those collectively create this as your individual establishment and the industry as a whole as something that people want to work at. Now, the big things I think, of course, are paying living wages, thinking about things like benefits, and I know healthcare is very expensive, but even things like PTO and making sure workers in this space get PTO, because guess what? They can leave, go to another industry, and have those types of quality factors for them in terms of where they work. So finding ways, affordable ways that the hospitality industry can do that is really critical, I think. Does that make sense when I say quality work environment, those kind of things?
Yes. Yep. That's exactly what I wanted to make sure that we were all kind of on the same page when we heard that. Thank you, Kim. That's great. Ross, I'm curious, just kind of building off of this, what tactics you have seen some of your clients deploy to retain their talent as well. Maybe in addition to what Kim has said, or if you want to kind of double down on some of the things that she's called out as well.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the stuff Kim said is great as well. I agree with a lot of it. What we're finding is that in terms of retaining your staff, basically there are several key components of that. First and foremost is being able to speak to the individual in terms that they understand, speak their language, right? That means maybe adapting to new cultural norms if you're going after younger generations. Being able to communicate effectively the type of advancement opportunities that exist there, right? Being proactive in showing a candidate or an employee what they're going to gain by staying with you. One of the best quotes I like to rely on is a quote that it's important for every employer to be able to train their employees well enough to leave, but treat them well enough so that they stay. And that is essential for any employer to be able to retain good quality talent. But that really comes down to the two main factors of, is there room to grow here? Am I able to learn new skill sets and advance my career? And is this a culture that I'm going to fit into? Not all cultures are the same, but is this something that will appeal to me and my sense of culture? Is this the customer base? Am I going to enjoy working here? Is this something that I'm going to get up every day and say, hey, you know what, this is a place that I'm going to enjoy being in? Obviously, making sure that things like there's no harassment policies, making sure that's a safe work environment. Obviously, these are just a baseline of what that means. But going even further, it's important to be able to highlight other attributes of a culture, community, right? A certain level of personality that resonates within your staff, and being able to make that a welcoming place for everybody. So that's something that we're really seeing is an important way of retaining those candidates. Obviously, we are seeing people paying out retention bonuses, but as I mentioned earlier, what the data is showing us right now is that right now opportunities for growth and cultural fits are higher on a priority list than actual pay currently. So sure, you can have a retention bonus that works. It's great, especially if it's a referral bonus, because that in that sense you're also getting a referral bonus that's someone who's connected to the network of your current staff. Therefore, they're much more likely to be a part of that cultural fit that you're really trying to establish and create an identity for your brand and your business. So that's really something that we're seeing right now is pretty effective, and that's something that I think that all employers should really take into consideration when it comes to mapping out their strategy for retention moving forwards.
That's great. Thank you. There is a question I do want to address from our audience too. This comes from Robert Miller. He works for a private university, and basically his question is rooted in how do you get Gen Z to want to work in the hospitality industry? It sounds like they've tried a number of different tactics. The one thing that's worked for them well in the past is word of mouth, but he's saying that with today's students, that they just don't want to work in the service industry. So I'm curious what you guys can speak to that, because I think the other data point that we continue to see in the space is that getting teenagers to work has been really difficult. And that's perpetuating the staffing challenges that we're seeing. So anything that you guys can advise on recruiting that generation?
Go for it, Ross.
Thank you. Well, Robert, basically what I've seen in my experience is that when it comes to recruiting younger generations, it's not that they are unwilling to work. It's just that maybe they feel there's a disconnect between, as I've mentioned before, I keep coming back to this, the culture of the business and what the cultural norms that they identify with. And that kind of comes down to not only diversity, inclusion, equity, and hiring, but also it really comes down to the way in which you're at least initially communicating with these candidates, right? On the outset. The first impressions are everything. So if a candidate of a younger generation is forced into a communication channel or thread with a business that is of a different generation, right? That's not a communication method that they are accustomed to communicating in their daily life on, they feel as though they are being a square peg being forced into a round hole, as it were. So in that case, it's important that at least in your initial contact with these candidates, excuse me, it's important that with these initial contacts with your candidates in terms of job supply and acquisition, that you're able to communicate across all platforms. That means going out to, obviously, yes, social media, but not just places like your typical Facebook and Twitter, going out to some of the newer platforms, going to Snapchat, going to TikTok, being able to communicate in methods and forms that younger generations are accustomed to right now. As soon as they see that is an available option for them, they're much more likely to be able to be open to a discussion and actually take a look at the culture. Once they see a culture and how much benefit it can offer them, they're much more likely to be willing and able to work and grow with the business. But the first step is really kind of getting out in front of them and presenting what you have to offer in a way that resonates with them. So that's what we're seeing on our end.
Mm-hmm. Just to build on that, I would say a couple things. We've found that Gen Z likes flexibility. So giving them more control over their schedule instead of a rigid schedule that they can never change. So letting them work maybe offering more flexibility, more of this on demand. I want to pick up these shifts or not. So that's a little more work on management. Maybe you have a bigger worker pool, but more flexibility in the scheduling they like. Obviously, text, don't call, make everything short job posts, short, fast apply process, a lot of those types of tactics. But the bigger things are, find the younger generation tends to want to find meaning, right? What are you doing with the community? This is everything Ross is saying about culture. What kind of environment are you creating? Do people's voices feel heard? You may want to do more team meetings where people can talk about what's going on and express their opinions and feelings on things. That type of environment is more conducive, right? Then there's like the little things. Make your establishment fun to the extent possible, right? Make it an appealing place to work. Look at your uniforms. Are they something that the kids want to wear? Can they wear their own? Can you give choice and flexibility? Again, this to me goes to meet people where they are. Khakis and a polo are not real fun. As silly as it is, are you feeding them? Like we're in the hospitality industry, food works. I always think it's like an underused thing that we have of do you offer kids family meal? Can they have soda? Like, don't make it a punishment, make it part of the perks, right? So it's understanding these macro things of flexibility, meaning how people communicate and meeting them in those spaces, and then looking at your environment, looking at your practices and seeing, is this an appealing place because they have choice and other opportunities? How do you make it fun, engaging, or career growth, opportunities would be the things I would suggest.
That's great. I love this question because we hadn't really, dived too deep on Gen Z, and I think it's such a big audience for our operators to think about. So this is great. So what I heard from you guys is, it's meeting them where they are, again, like social media, using technology, and then focusing on the issues that matter to them. So that can be DE&I initiatives. I think that can be sustainability, community service, what your mission is, what your culture is. And then that flexibility, giving them some choice or feeling like they have some control of how work fits into their life, seem to be really great strategies that operators could deploy. Great. Okay, so I want to be mindful of time. I'm going to try to wrap us up. I think the last question I'd like to land on for both of you is, staffing it's a problem that's existed before. I don't imagine that this is going to get any easier for operators. So as we look forward, like, what does the future of staffing look like? What would you guys tell operators to keep in mind for maybe the immediate future, but then in the next couple of years? What do they need to prepare for? Kim, why don't I start with you, and then we'll wrap with Ross.
Yep, sure. I would go back to maybe my opening comment, which is there will always be new technology out there, and being open to things that can drive efficiency, speed, anything you're doing manually that you find yourself repeating over and over, get rid of that, automate it, and move that off of your plate so that you can save time for that very important human engagement that is not going to go away. With Gen Z, those types of conversations, creating that atmosphere is going to become more and more important. So nobody has enough time in the day to do all of the things that we are doing today. So find technology that are out there. There are very affordable options, and you don't have to invest in thousands of dollars to get everything set up to automate some of the things that will actually allow you to go think about the human element of your operation. That's what I would come back to for the future.
Great, thank you. Ross, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So as I have kept saying, the future of staffing really is going to be similar to what Kim said, being able to embrace technology in conjunction with personal touch as well. As she said, I couldn't agree more. You need to be able to automate the processes that you find yourself replicating over and over, and allowing yourself the time and freedom to be able to give that personal one-on-one interaction. Also, we're finding that staffing companies will need to embrace more of a growth mindset when it comes to cooperative partnerships with its employers' employees, especially looking at ways that companies can focus on creating even greater mutually beneficial relationships than currently exist, right? Looking at how excuse me, looking at ways to highlight and improve what additional benefits an employer can offer other than simply wages, and what more an employee can offer other than just their labor, right? Like I said, this comes down to culture and kind of the way that culture is viewed in the workplace this day and age. It needs to be a cornerstone rather than an afterthought. So this is something that we find that the industry will need to adapt to, and what will be adapted to, because that is something that is being much held in much higher value as we move forwards into the future. So that's something that I feel in the next coming years will be something that will take more of a center focus than it has previously.
That's great. Thank you so much to both of you. I can't tell you how great this has been just to learn from you and hear from you, what you guys are seeing, what you've seen work in the field. And I think just to give our audience and the operators things to think about in terms of what they can do for their employees and what they need to be thinking about for the future. So thank you so much to both Ross and Kim for being here today. And then for our audience, thank you for your time and your questions. This will be posted on our channel, so you can continue to watch this later. And then I would also just say that if you need additional help with recruiting, you can find solutions like Landed on backofhouse.io. So please check that out and reach out to Landed as well. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great week.